In this tutorial, you'll learn how you can add borders to the edge of your images in WebSharp Pro. You can do this with both the quick exports as well as with the crop overlays, and we'll just simply start with the quick exports first. Clicking on Settings, you want to navigate to the Quick Export tab. This is a Pro-only feature, but if you have it, you just simply need to toggle on the borders. When you turn it on, you get all these additional options for the width, placement, color, and optional drop shadow. So with this, we can choose a width that will be a constant width border around the edge of the image, and it could be either in a fixed number of pixels, such as 100 pixels, or as a percentage. I would say that a fixed number of pixels may be ideal if you want to do something like 1 or 2 pixels as a stroke around the edges. But if you want to have a consistent look and feel across many different sizes of exports, as you change different formats for Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever, a percentage is going to give you a more consistent looking border without having to come back and constantly tweak the value here. So I think most of you probably will go with a percentage. The percentage here is applied as a percent of the average of the width and height. So just add width plus height, divide by 2, multiply that by 6%. That's how the panel thinks about it, because it has a constant thickness for this border all the way around. It doesn't have a different thickness of the border for the top versus the sides. So that's what this percentage means. Then we have the placement, which can either be inside or outside. If we choose outside, this is going to be added to the existing dimensions, meaning that we get something larger than 1080 and larger than 566. It's going to grow outside the image after any necessary cropping to hit that aspect ratio. Now, that's not great for social media if you're trying to hit a specific output size, and so you might want to choose the inside option. In fact, most of the time I prefer the inside option, which means that your JPEG will be exactly these dimensions. It's not going to change the size of that file. But in bringing things in, bear in mind that when you decrease the height and you decrease the width by the same amount, but they're starting from different places, that is, you don't have a square aspect ratio, then the aspect ratio on the inside is not the same as the aspect ratio on the outside. So some additional cropping may occur relative to the non-border version of your image. That's expected, and you can further control things by choosing how you crop or keeping the full image up here as well. And we'll take a look at some options for that in a few moments. Then we have our border fill and color. Let's just stick with a fixed white. We'll come back to that, and the drop shadow will come back to that as well. Let's just take a look at what happens when we do a 6% inside border here. I'm going to shift click on sharpen. It's going to run through. It's going to ask me about my cropping. Since I had it interactive, I think it looks good. I'll accept it. And then it'll proceed to completion with an image that is overall 1080 by 566. So it kept the dimensions we wanted and gave us the white border all around. Because I've left it open, we could also customize it, and I could go in and change the color now to be some other gray or some color, whatever I might want to do. So there is some flexibility here if you leave things open. Let's close this and come back and take a look at some other options. This time, let's go change this to a fixed pixel width. We'll go with 100 pixels and we'll choose it on the outside. So I'm going to get 100 pixels wider on the right and 100 wider on the left. So my new width is going to be 1280. That's 1080 plus 2 times this width, and the height is going to go up to 766 with this new border. I'm going to choose a different border. This time I'm going to switch it over to the auto. The auto method will analyze the colors in the image and find the best match to put around the edges so that it will dynamically give you a color that just nicely frames the image. I'd say most of the time you're probably going to choose white or black as a fixed color or auto. Those are usually going to be, I think, the preferred or more popular options. And then I'm also going to turn on the drop shadow, and you can see how that looks. We'll shift click on sharpen. And here we see that we're using an outside border, which is going to increase the final dimensions. So it's just a warning from the panel letting you know that you're not going to get these dimensions. You're going to get something bigger. And notice also that the cropping now is coming off the sides instead of the top, because in this case, we have the aspect ratio that matches these dimensions as opposed to an aspect ratio that was modified by an inside border. I'm going to accept this, let it run to completion. And here you see the automatic color that's been applied nicely matches the image and has the drop shadow around the edges. We can open up our effects here and notice if we turn off or on the drop shadow, that's the effect it's giving the image. Just gives it a nice 3-dimensional look. And you can also modify it by double-clicking on the drop shadow and changing the values here if you're leaving your image open and want to further customize things. Let's close this And we'll just keep going. Back into the settings here. I think we've pretty much investigated the various options here, but they also interplay with our cropping. We've cropped in every case, but what if we want to keep all this and add a border? Well, we can go and say, let's keep the full image and fill with color. And both the border and the fill with color are going to pull from this same value. So it's going to expand essentially twice in one dimension. It's going to fill, and then it's going to add a border. So we're not going to have a consistent border on the edges. It'll be a little bit wider in one direction. Let's go ahead and shift click on sharpen. And we won't be asked to crop this time because we're keeping the full image. And you see there that the height is now been expanded a little bit more than the width. So if you want a non-symmetrical border, that's what you do, is keep the full image with the solid fill and add a border. Let's close this. And now we can take a look over at the crop overlays. And I do want to note that whatever settings you have here will pre-populate when you add a new crop overlay. I'm just going to switch this over to kind of the normal settings that I would use, something like this. And we'll just maybe choose an inside white fixed border. So it doesn't really matter, but I just want to show how it pulls from that. So I'm going to do a one-off template rather than editing the master. I can just shift click on crop overlay. Here we get the advanced interface. If you see the basic interface, just click to get the advanced interface and notice that it's pulled in those settings that we had previously. Now the fill's a little bit different because there is no cropping with the crop overlay. You've already determined it interactively on screen. So your options are going to be the same keep options. There's also a new content aware fill option, which is not generally available with the quick exports because you don't want to do that to large areas. And then prompt would ask you what to do. So you can, choose whatever you want here or just leave it in the prompt. It's only going to matter if you run off the edges, or if it's in your master template, choosing one of these keep full image options is going to determine how it's imported. It will resize to keep the whole image. So let's just use the keep full image fill with color in this case to be the same. And I'll leave it with white this time. And I want to go back and choose the same Instagram landscape to match there. So just go pull that. So I've got my dimensions. I've got my border and fill all set. Looks good. Go ahead and add this template. It's being automatically imported and voila. You can't see the border though because it's off the edges. So I'm going to hit Command T while I have my overlay selected. And then I can just click and drag in, and you see here the border that's being previewed. Now, as I bring this in like this, it is going to be changing the cropping, but I'm going to go ahead and accept it just so you can see this. And notice that that border updates dynamically. So these previews have a fixed border that is going to dynamically change when you resize them. If I go and resize again a little smaller, notice that this border is not shrinking, but 100 pixels as a relative amount for this overall area, which is always going to be these values we've set, or it really is going to be these values from the template. They just happen to be the same right now, is smaller. So as soon as I accept this, you see how that shrinks. So that's what's going on there. Is it's not going to dynamically update as you drag, but once you're done resizing, it shows you the preview. So this would be the output that I should expect from this template. I'm going to shift click on sharpen and we'll let that run. And we'll see that that is in fact what we got. Here's our new file with our drop shadow, our white border. And if you just compare that to where we started, you see that you're getting a nice preview showing exactly what you're going to get with this option.